The Spotlight, shining a light on podcasts and videos that have caught our attention.
Hi and welcome to The Spotlight. My name is Jen Spiker and today I'll continue highlighting a video from Creation Ministries International proposing that only the Bible can explain the Ice Age. If the Bible is a true record of history, it stands to reason that it would be useful when trying to make sense of the past, including a global flood. While scientists have many Ice Age mysteries to explain, such as the post-Ice Age extinction event, Dr. Tas Walker believes the biblical post-flood Ice Age model does a good job of explaining the evidence we see around us.
The Spotlight with Jen Spiker.
One meteorologist, a climate scientist who specialises in the Ice Age, Michael Ord, he estimates it would have taken something like 500 years for the ice to build up on the continents. And that's because the oceans are warm. And that has a lot of implications for other things, which I'll get onto. But after the ice peaked at the glacial maximum, the oceans were cooling. So once they started cooling, the ice, there was less precipitation, the ice melted back. And so it melted back a bit quicker than in 500 years. About 200 years, the ice had melted back, and so to around about the level where we are today. And so there's a lot of features that come as a result of that. But that's a very simple model that explains why it started and why we see it, why it built up, and then why it melted back. And we don't have anything really elaborate in it as far as these funny, what you might say, cycles of the Earth's orbit and that sort of thing. See, it happened quickly. After the flood, which was about 4,500 years ago, wasn't millions of years ago. The millions of years comes from the geologists who believe in long ages because they don't believe in the catastrophic flood.
Okay, so it's the Bible provides the answer through Noah's flood because I guess, first of all, what we'd need to know is that, and I think was maybe presupposed there, is that the flood was a highly tectonic active event. And it produced a lot of volcanoes, undersea volcanoes, a lot of magma coming up. There was a lot of heat that heated the seas. And that was the thing that gave the moisture, because that was the issue we were talking about before. The big mystery was the amount of moisture, the amount of snow and ice. And if you've got hot seas, you've got a lot of evaporation.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of evaporation. You've got a lot of rainfall and snow and ice fall as you get on the continent. So you've got hot seas, cold land masses.
That's right. So, but the warm seas is the main thing. It doesn't take much warmth, extra warmth, to greatly increase the amount of evaporation that's on the oceans.
Yeah, I've heard that.
So that's the first thing. And the other thing about it is that it explains, a lot of things to do with migration, to do with animals, to do with habitats.
Yeah, some of these smaller mysteries. So can you tell us about why did all the large animals die off after the Ice Age?
Well, first of all, why did they live in Siberia?
Yeah, well, how did they live? Yeah, you're right.
We have the woolly mammoths, and that's, the Ice Age movies. They have these animals living in these places, don't they? They weren't living on the ice. They were living in this area where there was ice.
Yeah.
And so the woolly mammoths lived in Siberia, and the climate was far more equitable. Yeah. And so there was lots of vegetation, there was lots of rainfall, and so what happened was there was lots of food, lots of water. And
so this is in the middle of the Ice Age?
As the Ice Age built up. So where did the animals come from? They came from Noah's Ark. So it was the elephant kind that came off the ark. Some went into India, some went into Africa, some went into Siberia. So you have this elephant kind there, a woolly mammoth. So, it would be adapted to the slightly colder climate there, but it was perfect. There were a lot of other animals there as well.
Yeah, so can we talk about the Siberia and Alaska? So these are right near the north poles, Siberia and Alaska. And in the lowlands, I was saying, there's a mystery. Why was it temperate? Why did any animals live there at all? Because under the secular model, where the Earth cooled and cooled and cooled, and more ice came, then surely the lowlands should be covered by ice. So how does the Bible explain, or Noah's flood explain the temperate environments where you could get the woolly mammoths, the different animals living in Alaska and Siberia?
Well, it's to do with the warm oceans. And so where the Arctic is now, there's a great big ice sheet which is floating on the ocean. And so the ocean there was cold. It's cold now. but it wasn't cold at the end of the Ice Age. It was warm. And so there was the land around that area, on the continents, would have been quite habitable.
Yes.
At the end of the Ice Age. Yes. And so these animals migrated up there from the Middle East after the flood, along with a lot of other animals that lived there. And so there was an incredible, prolific community that was there. And so that explains why they're there. It answers that mystery without even trying.
Yeah, so it's the warm oceans, just to make it really clear, it's the warm oceans making the coastal areas on the land a nice area to live, a temperate environment, whereas as you go to the middle of the continents, of course, that's where all the snow and the ice was.
That's where the ice is. And it's not just up in the Arctic, in that area, but around most of the continents.
Yes.
And so the area was quite easy to live in, quite livable, in so much parts of the world at the end of the flood. There's one other big consequence of this, is that Earth's climate is stable. So there was a huge, you could call it a perturbation, but it's a bit big for a perturbation, but a big deviation from where it is now, from its stable position. So the oceans were warmer and this big deviation occurred, and the Earth returned to stability. It took 700 years, but it returned to a stable position. And so that should give confidence and it should give some sort of sense of relief to people to realize that we live in a world which is designed to be stable, designed for people to live in, and we shouldn't be terrified that there's going to be some sort of tipping off the edge of a cliff as a result of climate. So that's one great consequence of this particular model.
So you're saying that some of the recent warming that we're seeing is actually just the Earth returning to its normal stability. So maybe before the flood, it was hotter. I've heard in the record we had greater levels of CO2 and greater temperature when we look at isotope ratios and things like this in the past. So before the flood, the Earth was warmer and we are returning to that warmer state. Would that be correct?
It seems to be like that. We don't have a great handle on what it was exactly like before the flood, although we do know that the continents had lots of vegetation on them, and which was ripped up during the flood. But the Ice Age, the post-flood Ice Age, is a very simple consequence of the events of Noah's flood, and it's a pity that people have forgotten about it, because it provides insights into so many things.
And there was one other thing I wanted to touch on. You said earlier was that one of the other ingredients for causing an ice age is cooler summers. And I think that's an important point, because you said the way that Noah's flood causes the cooler summers is the aerosols from the volcanoes, the aerosols from the tectonic activity that was coming up, they would have caused the Earth to have a greater albedo, so more of the sun was reflecting off them, so it means the summer doesn't get quite as hot. And I think that's probably a major issue in developing an ice age model is, well, okay, you get more ice in the winter, if you get precipitation and build up in the winter, then the summer just melts it off. But if you've got the summers slightly cooler, and so that's another unique thing that the Noah's flood does, is it creates a cooler summer for the ice to remain.
That's the model, or the insights from the Ice Age. The Bible doesn't actually talk about aerosols being in the atmosphere and that sort of thing. And it doesn't actually talk about great volcanoes, and that's been pieced together by us looking at the geological evidence. But it does provide a framework, a time framework of how long the waters took to rise, and how the ark came to rest, and how long it took for the waters to come off the land. And when we look at the geology, we can sort of piece this together and work out where it fits. And so the Ice Age was after that. Now, the secular person, that they have got this long view in their mind, and so they say the Ice Age sort of began about 2.6 million years ago, and it lasts to about 11,000 years ago. And so they have got this long age model in their minds, but in actual fact, it wasn't 2.6 million years ago. It was after the flood, about 4,500 years ago. And so that's the length of it, 700 years for that particular Ice Age period. And since then, which the secularists, they would say 11,000, but from a biblical perspective, it was about, it was less than 4,000, something like 3,000 years ago. That's when things have been stable. But there have been changes since then with the medieval warm period, and then there's a cold period, little Ice Age and that. But basically, the climate is stable. There's another thing, is that the Ice Age explains the mass extinction which occurred at the end of the Ice Age. That's so.
How does it explain that?
Well, the animals, these large animals which lived on the lands, where did they come from? They came from Noah's Ark. So all the animals, everything that breathed air lived on the land. The original kinds came off the Ark and they multiplied up, and then they migrated out to different parts of the world.
And we said how they existed because of the warm oceans, and they could exist even in the northern parts.
They could migrate there.
But how did they die off?
Well, how did they get there? That's another question that comes about. It's probably better to deal with that one first. How did they get there? Yeah. Well, when the ice was on the continent, so you have the ice being precipitated, the ice and the snow on the continents. That means the ocean levels are lower.
Okay.
And so that's widely recognised that the ocean levels were lower. And there are maps of various continents. There are maps of Australia as to what the size of the continent would be during the Ice Age. And they've given it a name. I think it's called Sowell or something like that. And so you can see this large expanse of Australia when the ocean levels were lower. And as a matter of fact, the estimate is that it's about 50 to 60 meters lower
than today's
sea level.
Wow!
And so that means that the land, the ocean, the land, the shoreline was farther out to sea than it is today. And so that would have been areas which vegetation was on. That would have been areas where the rivers flowed across to get to the ocean. So you can actually see these, the river courses under the ocean today since the ocean's returned to its level. So with the larger area of land, that means that people could migrate easier. So they could migrate down through Indonesia into Australia. So you'd be able to get animals into Australia. And also they could migrate across the Bering Strait into North America. So the first sort of people that got there, they would have come from the Ark and they would have migrated in there. So you've got jaguars which have come into North America and down into South America. So that was, a really easy way to explain that is it was when the ocean levels were lower during the flood, after the flood, when the Ice Age was nearing its peak. So that's another simple explanation that comes out so easily to explain the current biogeography on the Earth as a result of what happened in the Ice Age, along with other things such as log mats and vegetation mats, which are the result of Noah's flood as well.
This is The Spotlight, and we've been hearing Dr. Tas Walker in part of a long-form interview produced by Creation Ministries International, exploring the mysteries of the Ice Age. As Tas points out, we live in a world that is designed to be lived in, and we shouldn't be terrified about predicted catastrophic results of climate change. I'm Jen Spiker, and next time on The Spotlight, we'll hear more of this conversation with Dr. Tas Walker, including why he believes the Bible explains the Ice Age best. If you can't wait and want to watch the interview in full, you can do that right now in the free Vision app. Just tap the Watch tab and scroll to the Creation Ministries International channel for this and other fascinating interviews.
For more great podcasts and videos like the one featured today, check out vision.org.au or the free Vision app.